First of all, it's a pleasure to see each and every one of you here today. We love talking with parents about our school. And as Natalie said, this is something that really does have to resonate with you. You really have to listen to that part of yourself that knows your child and knows your family in order to pick a school that feels right for your child and for your whole family. One thing that Natalie didn't mention when she introduced me is that I'm actually the mother of 6 children myself. The youngest is now 20. So I've been through the process that you're going through now many different times, and it kind of looked different for each of my kids. And one thing I can say now is that all 6 of my children were quite academic people, but they were different in every other respect. And I now feel sad, actually, that I didn't know about Berkeley Hall in time to put my 6 children here, because without exception, all 6 of them would have done well here for a variety of different reasons. And that's one of the reasons I'm here. I've been in education for over 30 years. I was not looking to be the head of school at a private school because that's another big job, and I'd done a lot of big jobs in education and thought that maybe I was done with that. But what happened was I came up to visit Berkeley Hall because I had nephews and a niece going to school here. And when I came up here, it just felt like an entirely different environment and a very special one from any of the schools I'd already been part of in a variety of capacities. And it really caught my attention. So I'm going to be talking to you today about 4 things that I think distinguish Berkeley Hall from any of the other schools that you might be considering and any of the other schools I've ever worked in. So the first thing is really the prevalence and the presence of what is now called in the education research a growth mindset. And many of you might have heard about that. Carol Dweck is a famous researcher who's been looking into that. And there are a lot of people talking about growth mindset now. And they talk about it a lot in terms of grit and determination, making sure that children can stick with things. And that's certainly part of growth mindset, but that's not the only part. Growth mindset's really also about what is called attribution theory, which means to what do you attribute your successes and sometimes your setbacks. And the tricky thing about that is that if children are allowed to think as they're growing and learning that their setbacks or their successes are due to something that's innate or fixed about themselves, say IQ, or artistic ability, or mathematics ability, and they think that that's static, that it's something they were born with, then when they succeed, they think, oh, it's because I have a high IQ, or I'm good at math. But then when they have a setback, which everyone invariably does at one point or another, they think, oh, it's because of my IQ, or because of my math ability. So they're attributing it to something that's fixed about themselves. A growth mindset basically adopts the idea that intelligence is something that can grow. Your ability in math or art or in any area is something that can grow and change, but you have to understand that and attribute your successes and sometimes your setbacks to something that you can change. You can change it by learning more, by asking for help, by hanging in there. That's when the determination piece comes in and the grit. If you stick with something, you will ultimately wind up learning that. Right? If you get enough help and if you get enough time. So often when you're at Berkeley Hall, if you hear a child saying something like, oh, I'm not good at that, or I'm not going to be able to do that, you will often hear another child sometimes, but certainly a staff member or faculty member say, yet. You may not be great at that yet. You may not identify as an artist or whatever yet. But if you stick in with it and you hang in there, then you will learn, you will grow, because it's something that's fluid, that you have control over through your effort. It's not something that's fixed about you. We see you as able to grow. And I think what's interesting about Berkeley Hall in terms of a growth mindset, because you have lots of people talking about growth mindset, is that we've been around for 105 years, and we've always had the growth mindset. And it's been long before growth mindset became a thing. So I started to look at that as an educator and think, okay, so how come this little school that's been around since 1911 kind of figured this whole growth mindset thing out earlier. What happened? And I came to the conclusion that it's because of our long and unique history as a school. Berkeley Hall was started in 1911. It makes us the oldest co-ed independent elementary school in Los Angeles, actually. And the people who started it were two sisters. One of those sisters, the Cooper sisters, one of those sisters was a much beloved teacher at what was then Westlake School for Girls, which subsequently became part of Harvard Westlake. And the parents of the kids that Miss Cooper taught really noticed that her approach with children and with education was very different and was very substantial and very positive for their children. So they went en masse to ask her to start her own school and to have that feeling be prevalent in that school. So she and her sister agreed that they would do that, and they started Berkeley Hall in an area called Berkeley Square, and that's where the name comes from. It was downtown LA at the time, before LA was very big. So they started the school, and one of the things they wanted to make sure of and to guarantee was that that same thing that those parents had loved about the teaching when Ms. Cooper was doing it at Westlake School for Girls would continue and would be prevalent in all the classrooms at Berkeley Hall. And they started the school with the motto, no labels, no limits, lots of love. And they really wanted to perpetuate that feeling. Now, what's interesting about the Cooper sisters as well is that they were students of a religion called Christian Science, which is a Protestant religion started in the 1800s in the United States by a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. It's not at all like Scientology. Sometimes people get those confused, and they're actually extremely different from one another. But the Christian Science religion espouses this idea that every individual person is a child of God and is uniquely spiritual and good and has unlimited God-given potential to learn anything that person needs to learn. So when they started their school, they thought, well, we think that's what those parents are at least partially noticing. So they decided to perpetuate that by putting in the charter that all the teachers, all the educators that would work with these kids would be students of Christian Science, because they knew that those people would espouse that kind of a viewpoint of children, that they were uniquely spiritual and good, and they wanted the people that were working with the kids as educators to see kids that way. But they didn't want to start a religious school, and they didn't want to teach religion. So they started it for everybody, and it's never been a church-supported school, not in 105 years, and we've never taught religion, not in 105 years, and we're never going to. But what we do is really work as educators every day to see the good and spiritual nature in each and every child, and to approach them with that expectation of good. And I do believe it's something that they feel. When you walk around the campus, you'll likely see that the children are kind of shiny. And I think that they really feel that people here are expecting the very best of what they are to come forth in whatever they're doing. And I think that that growth mindset, in a way, but spiritually based, is something that has always permeated this place. And it's something that attracted me, and something that I think is attracting other people to it as well. And I think it's a lovely balance, by the way, as well, to have kind of I like to say that we're kind of the most spiritually mindful, non-sectarian school around. You know, it has that kind of nice blend where all religions come to school here and all of them feel embraced. And it's a really lovely environment, that presence of that growth mindset. The second thing that really distinguishes Berkeley Hall is the level of professionalism that we're now working to bring to education. One of the things I tell our current parents is that teaching is a profession, but it has never been treated as one, even by the people who are actually doing the teaching. In other words, other professions like law or medicine, these have a knowledge base that people are building off of. When a lawyer makes a decision or a doctor decides to operate a certain way, they're basing those approaches on a whole knowledge base of what others have done before them and a record of that knowledge. And they have a common vocabulary. Teaching actually doesn't have that. And that's kind of a little secret that most people don't know, but it's true. I've worked a lot in education, both as a teacher, a district level administrator, a researcher out of UCLA, an assessment designer, was part of a company that did the TIMS research, which is the Third International Math and Science Study, and we did a lot of professional development with teachers. And this is something that kind of came out, is that teaching is a culture, it's not really treated as a profession. So in order to improve learning, you must improve teaching. There's no way to make an end run around it. And oftentimes what happens is you'll see people try to dictate from above. They'll say things like, here are the standards, this is what you're supposed to be covering, and here's some assessment, boy, you better make sure your kids can pass it. And they're missing the whole middle, which is what's going on in the classrooms, and how do we help the professionals who are teaching to improve their lessons and improve their teaching every day in service of these kids, and to make that better for the children. So something we do at Berkeley Hall, and we started this 5 years ago, we started an initiative that we call Depth of Study. It's a sort of lesson study. If you know anything about international, the Japanese do lesson study, for example, very successfully. But what it is getting the teachers together on a regular basis to talk about and improve teaching. Not just get together to talk about their department and the party that's coming up or whatever, or the problems on the playground, but to talk about the teaching. And one of the things we wanted to accomplish through this system right away was to really look at our performance standards. And let me take a moment to explain the difference. You all have heard of Common Core, right? Those are content standards. That's a list of stuff kids should know and be able to do. So a content standard might read like this. The children should read fluently at grade level with good comprehension. Okay? It's content standard. The trick is, and the problem is, it never talks about how fluent is fluent at grade level. So how many words per minute is that? And what does it look like for a third grader, for example, to comprehend a passage well versus a sixth grader, an eighth grader, or a kindergartner? How would you know that? They don't tell you that. That's actually left to the schools to decide. And most of them don't do that work. Not because they're lazy, but because there's an assumption that somehow teachers are going to be on the same page, particularly if you give them certain things like, oh, we all have the same rubric. A 3 looks like this, and a 2 looks like this, and a 1 looks like this. But if you get teachers into the room to look at actual student work, you will find they will not agree. And it takes constant work and conversation to get clarity on where kids need to be at or above grade level in a variety of areas. So the work we started to do as an entire team of educators was to say, okay, we've got kids growing up to 8th grade, and then they go off to a variety of independent high schools in Los Angeles, depending upon the right school for them. That's a whole process we go through too. It's very personalized. But what does it look like to be at or above grade level in 8th grade? So we started to do that work 5 years ago, to get clarity about what it actually looks like, and to make sure that our whole faculty understands, so that that expectation is articulated clearly and in ways that parents and students understand too, all the way down to the little ones. Now, somebody asked me the other day when I was talking to grade level parent at breakfast, he said, so how did you know that that was right for all the high schools you're sending kids to? I said, great question, because that crossed my mind year one. I thought, I don't want to be up here with all of us working professionally as educators to improve education and decide what it looked like to get to 8th grade, and be up here in our happy Berkeley Hall bubble, deciding what that looks like. So I started going out to our receiving high schools. There are about 15 of them that we regularly send kids to. And I asked them, I said, can you send me your performance standards? How good is good enough? And they would say, certainly. And they'd send me their content standards. The child will read at grade level for 9th grade and comprehend. And I couldn't seem to get them to do it, partly because I think a lot of schools aren't actively engaged in that level of work, because again, teaching's not always treated like a profession. And partly because in high school it's even more problematic in a way, because you've got several English teachers in 9th grade and several math teachers, and there might be pockets where they get together because they like each other and they want to talk about what things look like, but a lot of the time they don't. They just don't. So I thought, okay, so what's the workaround? What are we going to do? Well, one thing that we did was I started inviting all of our graduates. So those lovely children that you saw up on screen came back the following fall to meet with me. They were going to go to a dance with their old friends here on campus. But I invited them for dinner. And I started doing this about 5 years ago. And they come in, they have dinner with me, they fill out a survey. What classes are you taking? What grades are you getting? Are you happy in the high school that was your number one choice that you got into? Are you making friends? What clubs did you join? What would you like to tell our junior high teachers that went well? What could we do better? That kind of thing. But more important in some ways is I asked them to bring back graded samples of their 9th grade work. So we have actual data. Oh, here's an A- test out of Harvard-Westlake. Here's a B+ research report from Viewpoint. So that we have at least some data that we can look at that would indicate about what the teachers are expecting of our kids. Okay? In addition, we're in constant contact with the department heads of our receiving high schools, because once kids do get into the high school of their choice, they then go through placement tests, for example, in mathematics. So if we ever see a discrepancy between what we thought that kid should do or how they should place and how they actually did, we're on the phone in a quick minute finding out why. Because we want to make sure that we are preparing these kids to the very fullest in every way possible before they go on to their high school experience. Somebody jumped over there. So that's another thing that I think really distinguishes us from other schools, is the level of commitment and professionalism we're talking about with every professional on this campus, really working to improve the teaching in service of improving student learning. And it really has had an impact. We're starting to get major league traction now, academically. And I think that that's really wonderful, because that also fits with the growth mindset. We're expecting the kids to adopt this idea that, hey, it's fluid and you can grow and you can be your very best self. We should be adopting the same attitude and modeling that for them. And I feel that that's something that we consciously work to do. Okay, so third thing that distinguishes us is the amount of diversity we have for an independent school. Based on the criteria that were given by the National Association of Independent Schools, we are at 47% diversity, which is higher than, I think, almost any independent school in the area. And you will see that too. And it's a wonderful thing, because we're diverse socioeconomically, culturally, ethnically, religiously. We just have a broad range of people for an independent school up here. And I think it really obviously enriches our culture and is something that we very much work to maintain, consciously work to maintain. But what's special about it to me as well is that there is a commonality among the people who come to school here. They are looking for that growth mindset. They are looking for that level of professionalism. They are looking for the kind of citizenship that we expect too. We focus a lot on that at this school too, and when we talk about the standards of where kids need to be, we're also talking about what it looks like to be a conscientious citizen at 8th grade versus 5th versus 2nd. It's something we work on all the time, is our core values of respect and responsibility, honesty and compassion. So they're looking for that too. So every family, no matter from what diverse background they might be, and they're different from one another in lots of other ways, but all the families who come here are looking for substance and looking for that citizenship component as well as a strong academic component and that sense of balance. So there's a commonality, and it's a very friendly community because of that. Lots of parents come and they make friends here, and families make friends with one another because they have that common sense of, hey, we're about substance, not just glitz or whatever. We really want to be part of a community that feels like this. And that makes it special up here too. The last thing is really our commitment to the nursery through 8th grade model. In the Los Angeles area, not nationally, but only in the Los Angeles area, it's kind of a dying breed. A lot of schools that used to go through 8th ceased to do so, I think partially for economic reasons, because some schools go through 12th, obviously, and there are others that start with 6th, they go 6th through 12. And I just think that it's such an important model to support. And I say that both as a parent and as an educator. The fact that we have, for one thing, the oldest children on this campus are junior high kids really makes a difference. It's different not having high school kids on a campus. It just is. And I have nothing against high school kids. All 6 of my kids were high school kids at one point. But it is a different feel. And I think also there's a lot of research, for example, that's recently been coming out. It was on NPR, I think it was out of Syracuse University, talking about how important it is for middle school age children to kind of be top dog and not bottom dog, because they're already going through quite a bit of change. I don't know how many of you clearly remember puberty, but I do, and it was a challenge, right? You're trying to figure out who you are and what you stand for, and you're going through lots of changes, and you're trying to figure out your social relationships as well as taking on more responsibility academically. And it's just a big time of life, and a big change. So having the oldest kids on campus be those kids that are going through that winds up being a wonderful thing for them, and it also winds up being a wonderful thing for our younger ones, because we have lots of buddying up between the kids. We have a peer tutoring in place that's been marvelous. It's just a wonderful thing to watch. The older kids working with some younger kids that have been identified by the teachers, and they take such responsibility. They take this so seriously. These peer tutors, they go in to check individually with each teacher about the child that they're going to be tutoring that day, and they take responsibility, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And you can see it when you walk around campus, because the young ones often know some of the older ones and really look up to them. We have a really sweet day on campus, for example, that we call Bobcat Day, because we're the Bobcats, and it happens the first Friday of the school year. And it's cross-age teams getting together to go earn Bobcat bucks around campus, which are pieces of paper, but they're going around doing different little competitions. And to watch these junior high children who are each their team leaders, walking around with their team that runs the whole range of ages and going up to do a competition in an area. And to watch, like, I've seen countless times, it's the sweetest thing. I'm not going to get weepy, but a 13 or 14-year-old boy whose voice is changing, getting down and talking to the little ones about, oh, Johnny, you're a fast runner. Why don't you represent us here at the... I mean, it's just, there's such a sweetness. And it's a protection, too, I think, to everyone, to have the oldest ones who are setting the standard of what it feels like to be the cool kid and the old kid, to have the sweetness of those kids deciding what that looks like. I'll give you a quick example of that. The kids go on outdoor ed trips in 6th, 7th, and 8th right away, like the second or third week, because we get a big influx of kids for 6th and a few in 7th. And we want to make sure the new people have an opportunity to get to know the kids who've been here for a while. It's great to take them all out of their context and send them off on these trips. It works really well, by the way. But in 8th grade, they already know each other, but in 8th grade, they go off to Yosemite for a week. And so I was texting, this past year, I was texting the teachers on the bus. How's it going? How are they doing on the bus on the way to Yosemite? And the teacher texts back and says, well, they voted for a movie on the bus, mostly the boys, and they voted for Frozen. And now they're in the back singing, do you want to build a snowman? And I thought, isn't that cool? That there's no one older around going, well, that's kind of dumb. And then that 8th graders set that standard. To them, that was kind of fun and cool, and maybe a little bit ironic. But the point is that they thought that was a cool thing to do. And the fact that they are the leaders, and they're the ones running student council, and they're the ones doing everything as the peer tutors, and not just the 8th graders, but the 7th and 6th too, that feeling permeates everything. And I think it's just really wonderful, because we like to say that by the time they leave us, they're fully baked. Because what we find is, when we talk to our receiving high schools, when we talk to the kids after they graduated, when we talk to the parents, is that they feel very well prepared academically, but they also really feel very clear as to who they are and what they stand for. And when they go into a high school, they're ready to kind of say, okay, well, this is what I stand for, this is who I am. Oh, I'll hang out with you and you and you, because you're kind of in alignment with who I am and what I believe to be right activities and the right way to go. They don't just follow the nearest group that will kind of include them. They're much more aware of what they stand for and who they are. So, to recap, presence of that growth mindset that was kind of founded spiritually in the thinking of the school, non-sectarian, don't teach religion, but do have that sense of really looking for unlimited God-given potential in the kids we teach. Second, the level of professionalism that's really working to improve learning by improving teaching, and a real commitment to that from the whole staff. Third, the diversity, which is very diverse for an independent school, but combined with that sense of a community that's coming together around a common purpose and sense that it's very important to have your children and your family at a school where there is consistent teaching of good citizenship and what that looks like, along with strong academics. And last, that commitment to that model of going through 8th grade and getting kids really ready to be part of a high school experience and continue on an individual trajectory that will really work for them throughout their lives. And then there's also the 66 Acre Campus, which you will see on tour. But that is wonderful too, by the way, because it gives space. There are lots of kids that just love having the room and the space to be up here. It's a real oasis. And that is one disappointment that our kids experience when they go on to high school. Is they'll come back and say, but man, it's really, where do you move? Where do you run? It's just, they're not used to that. Where are the deer? Where are the monkeys? What happened? So that's a little bit different. So before you go on tour,
Can we introduce our two deans so they can answer questions?
Absolutely. We have our Dean of Students, Mrs. Duffy back here, and our Dean of Academics, Ms. Colmer. They're also available to answer questions, but do you have questions for any of us at this point in time before you go on tour? No? How extraordinary. Well, we'll be available when you come back from tour too. If you are on tour and you come up with some questions, and you want to talk to Natalie or to me, possibly to our deans. I'm not sure what their schedules are this morning, but I'll try to kind of come back in near the end of the tour and answer any questions you have. And you also have some wonderful parents here who will be leading the tours as well, and they can certainly answer questions, particularly from a parental point of view. So thank you again for coming. We're so happy that you're up here today, and we look forward to talking to you further.
Thank you very much. Thank you.